talking about a project that we've done. But before I do that, I'm going to just briefly say what NEWMOA is. People are probably wondering. So we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan interstate association. We were set up by the governors of the Region 1, EPA Region 1 states back in the 80s. Our membership is the solid waste, the hazardous waste, the waste site cleanup, and the pollution prevention programs in the 8 Northeast states, because subsequent to our forming, New York and New Jersey joined as well. There's a lot more information about NEWMOA on our website that's listed there. So the project promoting Pay-As-You-Throw, it was funded by the USDA Rural Utility Services Solid Waste Management Grant Program. So I just have to put up the standard disclaimer that they request on all the materials that are produced. So the project promoting Pay-As-You-Throw, we had partners in Vermont, and they are on the line today to provide more information and for you to ask questions as well. We've got the Northeast Kingdom Waste Management District. They're up in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont up here. And Paul Tomasi is the Executive Director, and he's joining us today. In the Northeast, we don't really use the county system that much. Most of our things are done at the town level, the city level, the municipal level, and then also in Vermont and in other places, we've got districts for solid waste management. So not every community within a county is part of the district, but the Northeast Kingdom Waste Management District is an organization of towns in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont, and then also the Wyndham Solid Waste Management District, which is in the southern part of Vermont here, and Bob Spencer, the Executive Director of the Wyndham Solid Waste Management District, is also joining us today, as well as one of the member communities, Moss Kaler from Brattleboro, Vermont. He runs the recycling, and they offer Curbside Organics program there and the Pay-As-You-Throw program. And he's also on the line. They'll be available during the question times as well. And then finally in New Hampshire, we worked with the Upper Valley Lake Sunapee Regional Planning Commission, and they're in a group of towns in this sort of area of New Hampshire. So the project, we've generated a lot of materials. We've got case studies of 11 communities, brochures, template program guides, outreach fact sheets. We've had regional meetings, presentations to 3 of our regional solid waste conferences here, and this webinar. All the materials that we've generated are posted on the website, and I will also be showing folks what those materials are at the end of the webinar so that you can get an idea. And they're also almost everything's been designed for use by anybody, anywhere. So the outline of the webinar today, we're just going to go over some Pay-As-You-Throw basics in case there are people on the webinar that aren't totally familiar with Pay-As-You-Throw. Then we'll go through some of the case studies that we've generated, talk about some of the findings of the project and issues and messaging around Pay-As-You-Throw, next steps for communities and that are interested in implementing Pay-As-You-Throw, and then also, like I mentioned earlier, showing the new resources that we've developed. So some Pay-As-You-Throw basics. Principle of Pay-As-You-Throw is that residents pay for according to the amount of trash that they generate for disposal. So if you generate less, you pay less. You generate more, you pay more. You're paying for waste management services more like a utility, like your electric bill. Pay-As-You-Throw systems are flexible. Towns can design their own system. Many communities, there's lots of different ways that Pay-As-You-Throw systems are designed in terms of their structure, their fees, whether people use their own containers, whether they use containers that are provided, whether there's special bags that are required. You can also set up a system that's by weight. However, that requires the use of a certified scale. So most communities don't operate their system that way, and rural communities certainly don't. So pay-as-you-throw, the basic benefit of it is that it's a system that saves a lot of money in town budgets. Waste management is typically one of the larger cost items in a town budget, and pay-as-you-throw systems are proven to reduce the amount of trash that's managed, usually 40 to 55%. And just through reducing that amount of trash, you're reducing the frequency that it has to be hauled and the tipping fee that is paid for that trash. So just through that, you're saving money. But then, because fees are charged for trash, you're generating income as well. So it really can offset quite a bit in town budgets for trash. It's not an added cost for taxpayers. It's just changing the way that residents pay for waste services. So removing costs from the budget, how much depends on the rates the town decides on. So fees can be designed to cover all the costs associated with trash and recycling, including operating the transfer station or the curbside system, or fees can just cover some of the costs, such as some people like to design systems where it's just covering the hauling and disposal cost for the trash. So pay-as-you-throw at transfer stations. Many rural communities have transfer stations for their trash. I forgot to mention earlier that this project focused on rural communities because of the funding source, and then also because we saw sort of a gap out there in information about pay-as-you-throw in rural areas. There's lots of documentation out there where for medium-sized communities and larger communities implementing pay-as-you-throw, but rural communities were sort of, there wasn't a lot out there. So that's why we focused on rural areas. So most rural areas have transfer stations. The usual options for transfer stations are requiring special bags or stickers that people would affix to a bag that's provided their own bag, or a punch card. You would sell a punch card with 10 or 20 punches on it, and then one space would be punched out for each bag that's brought to the transfer station. However, it's also possible, especially in rural areas that don't have a lot of traffic, to implement pay-as-you-throw without that. Just getting the transfer station attendant has to look at the material that's being brought in and decide how much to charge for that. However, that's creating some financial control issues, so some communities decide that they need to require special bags or stickers or punch cards. Many communities have 2 or more sizes of bags. Everybody seems to have a 32-gallon or 30 to 33-gallon bag as or container as their base size, and then most communities seem to have a smaller size that they sell and have fees for, and some communities have larger size as well. It does require some small administrative costs for the town to purchase the bags, stickers, or punch cards, to sell them either directly from the town office or to local merchants that then sell them at their stores. You have to keep track of the inventory of bags, and you have to manage the money that's coming in. So there is some administrative fee for communities or cost. Can also do it with curbside systems, and believe it or not, there are some rural areas that do have curbside trash pickup provided by the town. Again, special bags or stickers that people have to put on their bags are usually the easiest option. Requires, again, convenient sales locations and some administrative costs. And if people, especially in rural areas, don't want to be putting their bags out on the curb because of animals ripping them apart, you can always put the bags into containers at the curb. Just have to make sure that everything that's in the container is in a bag. And then a lot of people with curbside systems will use containers instead, and you have different fees for different sizes. Again, a base size is usually 32 gallons. And then you charge more for larger sizes. That That kind of system has a little bit higher administrative costs for the town because you've got to know which homes have which level of service and be billing them monthly or quarterly, and you've got to manage the collection of the money. And you also have to have a system to deal with trash that doesn't fit in the container that's being paid for. So either the trash collection folks have to keep track of extra trash at a particular home and make sure that it's billed for, or often people just require the use of a special bag or sticker that's put on the extra trash. So then you've got to have those available and a system to sell those and purchase them. And then the key piece is the trash collection folks have to leave all trash that's not properly paid for at the curb, and that can be a problem. But you can't have people abusing the system and putting in and having their trash collected that they're not paying for. So that sort of ends the pay-as-you-throw sort of basics. Does anybody have any questions that they want to ask at this point? I don't know if any have come in.
Yes, we've had a couple questions come in, Jennifer. One question was, what about bulky items?
Right. So transfer stations, at least in the Northeast here, tend to have fees for bulky items. So the transfer station, when items come in that are bulky, like tires or couches or chairs, big items, mattresses, those all have a fee assessed on them that the town has already decided that's sort of separate from the pay-as-you-throw system. For curbside, a lot of communities don't allow bulky items at the curb, and they have, and maybe Bob or Paul can mention quickly how bulky items are handled in curbside systems. But a lot of times they have special days where those items can come in, and they're not really part of the curbside system. But I don't want to comment, Paul or Bob. About handling bulky items.
This is Bob Spencer in Brattleboro, Vermont. We only have 3 communities out of 19 member towns that have curbside, and they basically encourage the residents to use transfer stations that are located within the towns for those bulky items. Here in Brattleboro, the district operates a transfer station, and as Jennifer pointed out, we have special fees for mattresses and large bulky items, demolition materials. And I believe that's the same with Paul Tomasi's Northeast Kingdom.
Yeah, we don't have any curbside bulky service here in the Northeast Kingdom. It's all funneled to the centralized transfer station.
Okay, yeah, they either sponsor days that people can bring things in, or the transfer station is open, certain hours and items come in.
But again, this is all part of when you launch the program, the education to make sure your residents are aware of these other outlets, and that would include electronic waste, hazardous waste, paints, demolition materials, leaf and yard waste that typically are not collected on the pay-as-you-throw programs.
Okay. Any other questions now, Andy?
Yes, but a follow-on the bulky, where haulers are already using 95-gallon carts for weekly collection, how to transition the use of bags in the carts. That's something the project covered, or you could otherwise speak to, Jennifer.
Yeah, I don't know if we've had any situations where they already had big carts like that. So I would just be speaking from general knowledge here and not specific from the project. But it seems like with a big cart like that, you're not really having a pay-as-you-throw system currently. So, it would be going through the process, which we'll talk about later, sort of to establish a pay-as-you-throw system, and part of that would be requiring the use of the special bags that would go in the cart.
And I know there are some hybrids out there, Jennifer, where they have the cart which may be covered by the existing tax levy, but then the overflow bags are pay-as-you-throw.
Right. However, that size of cart is awfully big. You're not going to produce the kind of behavior and the kind of results when you have a cart that's that big. That's allowing sort of too much free, quote-unquote, trash to create a lot of behavior change. But
well, this is Bob Spencer again, and Paul, I believe, is aware of this. In Vermont, there has been when we start July 1, mandatory pay-as-you-throw throughout the entire state. There has been some decisions or policy that large carts are allowed up to, I think, even 96-gallon carts, because some haulers already had a network of collection. It's kind of the inverse of having only $1 per 33-gallon bag. You know, there's not a lot of financial incentive, but that is at the discretion of the municipality usually.
right. Yeah, people can design whatever system they want. With that size of a container, you're probably not going to generate a lot of behavior change, though. So it depends on the goals of your program. So.
And Jennifer, maybe just another comment more than a question. Somebody said maybe weighing the carts would be a way to address the issue of the big carts being kind of unconstrained.
Right. You just need to have the equipment to weigh things, and that's just you're upping the level of sophistication there. So,
Jennifer, could I make a comment?
Sure.
It seems like, and Bob, maybe you can interject if I'm wrong, but the state of Vermont established 32 gallons kind of as the baseline. So if you had a 96-gallon cart, as long as you were charging, 3 times the base rate, I think that would be acceptable. But you're right, the large cart would not necessarily promote the waste reduction or greater recycling, but it is possible to use that size of a container.
Correct.
Okay, I think maybe we should try moving on.
Yeah, Jennifer.
And I guess
moving on from that question, because you have a few more questions pending. You want to hold them, or?
Oh, yeah. Why don't we hold them so we make sure we keep everything moving here?
Okay.
Yeah, and one key piece that I forgot to mention is, pay-as-you-throw systems do rely on charging a fee for waste and not charging a fee for people to be able to recycle materials. So we all know recycling isn't free, but the amount of money that recycling costs either needs to be incorporated in the fees that you're charging for the trash, or it still remains in the tax base. So that's a key principle of pay-as-you-throw that I forgot to mention. So now we'll go through some case studies here from some small communities, and we'll try to keep things moving. So I, through the project, contacted 14 small communities in New Hampshire and Vermont that have pay-as-you-throw systems. This is just a brief summary. Most of them have transfer stations, as we mentioned. A lot of them put their systems in place back in the 1990s. The dollar figures that you see here are what they charge today for a 32-gallon size. Some communities put systems into place in the 2000s, and then more recently Newark and Canaan, Vermont. And then, as we mentioned, some rural communities do have curbside pickup. Back in the 90s, 2 communities in New Hampshire put it into place, and then more recently, Vernon, Vermont instituted a curbside system with pay-as-you-throw. So I'm going to go through now and give some more detail on some case studies that are more recent so that we actually have before and after data to show. And then these case studies are all written up in much greater detail, you know, and posted on the NEWMOA website, so we'll show them to you later. So I'm just going to give the brief information now, and then there's more in the write-up. So we'll start with the Curbside system in Vernon, Vermont. They just adopted it just about a year ago, and when they did, they added single-stream recycling pickup to, previously they had just done trash pickup, and they designed their system to cover all the costs. They do require the purchase of special bags, and here's their price structure. And here's the preliminary results down at the bottom. You know, disposal was more than cut in half, and recycling doubled here. So we're trying to compare the same periods. Bob probably has more more current data, but I haven't received it yet to add to the slide here. So, now we're going to move to transfer station communities. Piermont, New Hampshire, smaller, just over 700 people. They put a system into place a while ago now. They've got their fee where it's usually covering all their costs, but as we all know, recycling markets are pretty down now, so they're probably not generating that much income from recycling, so they're maybe having to have a little more of the system in the tax, covered by their taxes. They do require special bags that are sold at town offices in the local general store, and again, disposal was cut by more than half, and recycling basically doubled. Northfield, Massachusetts is a larger community, but it's right on the border with Vermont and New Hampshire, so it's still in the rural area there. They put pay-as-you-throw into place in 2005. They've set their fees to cover just the hauling and disposal costs. They do require the purchase of special bags. You can see their fees are, you know, quite a bit lower, but even at those low fees, they've cut their trash disposal by about 40%, and because they've got dealing with less trash, they've also been able to reduce their hauling and disposal costs by about 40% as well. Newark, Vermont, very small community, less than 600 people. They put a pay-as-you-throw system into place in 2013. They were motivated to do it because they felt like they were getting a lot of out-of-town trash coming in, and they needed a system to sort of put the brakes on that. You know, their residents were paying for a lot of trash that wasn't theirs. And they did it and they have successfully removed all the costs of waste management from their town budget because they hired a contractor instead of a town employee to operate the transfer station. And that contractor is paid only by the fees that he collects from the people bringing their trash in. So that's a great incentive. Even though he's handling cash, you know, he's got the incentive to charge everybody that comes in and to charge for every bag that comes in. He's, you know, operating the transfer station includes operating the recycling program and the bulky waste program, but this is the fees that are charged for trash. And again, you know, disposal was down by over half for the town that they had to now still pay for. Actually, they don't have to still pay for it, sorry, the contractor pays for it. And here's the sign that they've got showing people what the fees are for the different sizes of bags. And the last case study is Canaan, Vermont. Canaan is literally on the border with Canada and New Hampshire. It's a fairly isolated community, and it's way up there. It's a little less than 1,000 people. They put pay-as-you-throw into place in 2008. And they decided to sort of do a 50-50 split where about the fees would cover about half the cost of their trash and recycling program, and the town budget would cover the other half. They required the purchase of special bags, and those are the fees that they charge. And I'm remembering something I did not say about Newark, Vermont. Not only do they have the contractor there operating the system, but they do not require that anybody purchase special bags. The contractor just, looks at what people bring and charges the fee. So they were the one case study of these 5 that we're going through now that didn't require purchase of special bags. Canaan Vermont does. They reduced the cost in their budget by half. That's just due to managing less trash, and then they're also generating income. So about half of this $57,000 a year is covered by the income that they're generating from selling bags and also the drop-off fees they charge for bulky waste. So this one's a little more complicated because 2 things happen. One, in addition to implementing pay-as-you-throw, the town also decided they were no longer going to service and pick up and deal with trash from the business community anymore. But they do still require the business community to report data to them. So we are talking apples to apples here with the disposal reduction. So, because once businesses also had to pay for their own trash, they're also incentivized to reduce it. So basically, trash again cut in half. That's from households and businesses together. And then this one's a little more apples to oranges because beforehand they had household and business trash, and they were hauling about 9.5 tons a week. And now they're down to, with just dealing with the household trash and just dealing with the smaller quantity from pay-as-you-throw, they're about 12.5 tons per month now that they're hauling. So a big question, people probably noticed that trash goes down by a lot, recycling goes up, but maybe not by as, doesn't make up the whole quantity. So where is all the trash going? So one of the things that's happening is that, like I said, with Newark, Vermont, they really thought out-of-state trash was coming in, out-of-state, out-of-town trash was coming in, and that's no longer happening once people have to pay. So that's one of the reductions. We like to think people are purchasing smarter, so they're not purchasing as much that has to be thrown away, and they're purchasing things that can be recycled. People are also incentivized to start recycling if they weren't before, or to increase their efforts at recycling, and also maybe start composting their kitchen scraps. They may be more motivated to donate for reuse and recycling, reuse than they used to be. Instead of throwing it out, we'll bring it to Goodwill. And then people do some funny things when they've actually got to put some money out of their pocket. So people will maybe try to put their trash in commercial dumpsters. So that's something that, implementing a pay-as-you-throw, you've got to let the businesses know that they might need to lock their dumpsters or restrict access better. And also, one of the communities I talked to, the woman said, well, I know my neighbor now brings his trash to work. So people will do some pretty strange things to avoid having to, pay that $2 or $3 out of their pocket. Another thing people can do is they can always hire a private hauler to come and pick up their trash. But typically a lot of people that are trying to be frugal and avoid the pay-as-you-throw fees are not going to do that because, hiring a private hauler is actually probably more expensive. So, so that's kind of what we found about what explains the reduction in trash. A lot of it is from increased recycling and organics composting and that sort of thing. But there's also some of these other factors that are involved. So that's another point to break. Do we have any other questions to ask at this point?
We sure do, Jennifer. The one that you ended on came up repeatedly about the delta between the the drop in disposal and the increase in recycling. And one maybe the only follow-on question of the ones that are asked related to that is, did the community see an increase in illegal dumping following the switch to pay-as-you-throw?
Right. So I have a slide on that in the next section, but no. So none of the 14 communities that I talked to have found any increase in illegal dumping. Before they put pay-as-you-throw systems into place, they might have had some trouble with illegal dumping in terms of bulky waste, because, like we said, transfer stations have already charged fees. Even if they don't have a pay-as-you-throw system, they charge fees for bulky waste. And so there is illegal dumping issues sometimes then, but pay-as-you-throw is really dealing more with the trash, and it doesn't create increase there. I don't know if Bob or Paul want to mention anything about that. Illegal dumping.
Okay.
Well, this is Bob in Brattleboro. There in the town of Vernon, where I also live, we had just a couple of incidents where someone put some trash in a recycling, and this is an unattended drop-off site, and we have since installed security cameras and posted friendly signage saying "Smile, you're being videotaped." We've put security cameras at 2 other sites, one in Brattleboro and one in the town of Putney, and we find that that's very helpful. And for the occasional mistake, there is the ability to identify the person and ask them to be a little more careful.
Okay.
All right.
Anything else, Andy?
Yes, the question about whether the project explored the use of innovative technologies such as RFID tags or scanners to track or measure trash.
Yeah, no, we did not get into that. A lot of rural areas are pretty low tech. Like Bob was mentioning, some places don't, particularly for recycling, don't even have an attendant there. So no, we did not do that. I don't know if some of the bigger communities, we were focusing on smaller communities. Bob and Paul both have, what's considered a larger community in Vermont, also part of their district. So I don't know if they're doing anything more high tech.
No.
Okay. Well, here's a question that I know we've talked about here before, but the question says, I live in Utah where land is abundant and landfill tipping fees are minimal. The area is not known for recycling or being necessarily environmental. They currently have curbside trash recycling service with containers. What advice would you give? So less economic incentive. And maybe less environmentally conscious consumers or homeowners.
Right. Well, pay-as-you-throw can be implemented anywhere, and would provide some economic incentive, and even at $1 or $2 a bag, and then you're still generating income to improve your recycling program and to pay for disposal. So, there's a lot of outreach that can be done, and a lot of, you can, if you were generating some more income. Now, I'm not sure, the economics of hiring a private hauler instead of using the town-based pay-as-you-throw system might be different out there, and might lead more people to do that. It's hard to say. In the Northeast, we do have pretty high tipping fees, but the principles of pay-as-you-throw, I think, apply anywhere. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on that. Or if there's any, people that are attending the webinar that have any experience with that sort of a setting.
Yeah, if so, maybe just send me a message and I can convey that to the group. A general question about how pay-as-you-throw, how does it increase recycling, or does it? I know you touched on that some, but if you could say it in 2 sentences, Jennifer.
Well, because people are now paying a fee per bag or per container of trash, it's providing an incentive to minimize the amount of trash that they're generating. And then one way that that's done is by diverting material to recycling. So, you know, pay-as-you-throw programs do show an increase in recycling, but like we mentioned here in a couple case studies that had the data, you know, the whole difference in the reduction in trash is not made up by the tonnage of recycling that you see. But recycling does go up because you're providing now an incentive for people to reduce their trash. So I know from my own experience, my sister is one of those people that really could care less, you know, and they would never, ever recycle except that they have pay-as-you-throw in their town. And that, you know, now they have to recycle because otherwise they'd be paying a lot more for trash. So,
right. Thanks, Jennifer. A question on your case study slides. What was the time period for the costs noted? Was it monthly or annually?
The cost?
Yeah, yes, the question came in on one of your early case study slides.
You know, those might be in the write-ups, but I did not put them here in the, yeah, I know, yeah, I can't,
yeah,
I don't, sorry, have them in front of me.
If the person that asked wants to type in a follow-on, I can take it up again, but, and this was touched upon a little bit, but a question about whether or not with pay-as-you-throw, as recycling rates go up, do you see an increase in recycling contamination? And I know Bob mentioned one case of intentional contamination where someone's throwing the trash into the recycling, but how about incremental contamination? Are people getting a little looser to bring down that their pay-as-you-throw costs?
Right. Well, in this part of the country, most of the transfer stations, and most rural areas are using transfer stations, have, you know, source separated. So people come in and their recycling is still source separated. So they're generating a very high quality recycling stream. People have to come in, they bring their trash in the bags, and they bring their recycling and sort it into the bins. So so that's the way it's done here. The curbside systems would be different and more subject to people. Again, there's been quite a series of webinars recently about single-stream recycling contamination and dealing with that, and I think pay-as-you-throw, you know, is a part of that. People are wishful recyclers, they call it as well. You know, well, I have this garden hose, it's made out of plastic. Oh, it must be recyclable, and they put it in the recycling when, you know, really it doesn't belong there. But so I don't know if Bob or Paul.
Jennifer, this is Bob. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One of the things that the town of Brattleboro does is they have a contract hauler that's collecting. There's a tag system to tag bags of trash that are not compliant if they have excessive obvious recyclables. They also have tags for the recyclables if they contain contamination, and also tags for the organics bins if the drivers see obvious contamination. So there are ways to manage it. I will say that pay-as-you-throw does tend to increase contamination to some extent, but it varies depending on your level of education and outreach and enforcement.
And the tags that you're talking about are left on the containers or on the people's door, or where do you leave them?
On the containers at the curb. So the drivers and the laborers that are doing the collection are actually your enforcement arm, or in terms of making that decision if the container as it's put out is acceptable. and they leave the tag with a check box, your recyclables were not collected because they were not in the proper container or they had contamination in it.
Thanks, Bob.
Okay, great.
A question about the fee schedule, I guess, whether or not, do you think there's an impact by residents seeing costs on a weekly or a bag-by-bag basis as opposed to monthly or even annual fees? Do you think that's a factor in reducing disposal rates?
Yes, I think, having to do it, contracting, if it's a curbside system with containers, you're contracting or you're paying for a certain amount per week. Yeah, definitely if you're paying a flat fee per year, who's keeping track of how many bags, is that flat fee for one bag a week? That's not provide, one flat fee per year is not providing an incentive to reduce on a regular basis, unless you're really being strict about that annual fee is for 52 bags, period. Well, then you got to keep, have a way to keep track of whether they're, really just doing one bag or one container a week or not. So, I don't know if that feels like that was the answer.
Yeah, I think so, Jennifer. It's it's not even so much as the schedule, but tying the cost directly to the volume or to the disposal.
Yeah, and usually people think of it as per week. You've got one 32-gallon container per week or two 32-gallon containers per week. It's not even really per month because whatever your schedule is. So a transfer station is different. People come when they come. They could come once a month, and then they need to pay what they pay, for however much they're bringing.
Right.
You can't just have a transfer station fee. You're charging $100 a year or whatever. Well, that's not tied to the amount of trash. So in curbside systems, you really do think of it on a weekly basis. Because even if it's a month, it's whatever your pickup schedule is. So if your pickup schedule is once every other week, then that would be what you would be charging your fee for, one 32-gallon container every 2 weeks.
Right. A question about hauler preference for container type. Do they prefer bags, containers, or something else? And then a follow-on as to whether haulers save money through lower labor costs and reduction in injuries, and I'm assuming that's with regard to containers, to automated container pickup.
Right. I think, we're talking about the rural communities. I'm pretty sure everybody's using a bag system. I did talk with one of the communities that their hauler that they were using was trying to pressure them into switching over to containers, but they were trying to resist that some because they felt like a big container in a rural area with long dirt driveways and things that people were. A large container would be difficult for them to maneuver, and people currently, I think, bags would go in their car and they would bring them down, and a big container wouldn't be able to go in their car, trunk, or whatever. So they were trying to avoid that conversion. But I don't know if Bob or Paul want to comment from, like, Brattleboro is a much bigger community. Moss?
Bags are the container of choice, although there are municipalities in rural areas that do use containers. I was in Quebec this winter in a very rural area. The county or the municipality has single-stream recycling with containers, carts that are lifted automatically, and trash automatically, and it's pay as you throw, based on the size of the cart, and then you can pay extra. Somehow they're tracking each stop somehow. So one of your questions earlier, there are ways to track each stop and the quantity that's picked up.
Right. All right, well, I think we should probably move on in the interest of time here, and we can take more questions as, as we're going here.
Great.
Now we're going to just summarize the findings and then sort of pay-as-you-throw issues and messaging that kind of came up and was recommended over the course of the project. So findings, as I mentioned before, the amount of trash managed is reduced 40 to 55%. That's reducing the hauling frequency and tipping costs, which is saving money. That you can implement at a transfer station pay-as-you-throw without requiring people purchasing bags, stickers, or punch cards. But you got to be careful about managing the money then. If the transfer station attendant is collecting money, you got to be careful. Computerized cash register that provides receipts can sort of help with that. Or you can be contracting out the operation of the transfer station where the collected fees are the only payment. In addition to Newark, Vermont, the case study that we went through, there's another community in New Hampshire that also does that. Towns vary on the extent that the fees cover all the costs to operate the transfer station. That's including staff and the recycling program. The fee in the Northeast that seems to cover most or all of the costs is about $3 per 32 gallons. Some communities recommended that if you really want to cover all the costs, you need to also be anticipating future costs. So setting the fees to save, if your transfer station might need a new compactor. If you really want to get waste management out of the town budget, you got to be able to save as well. Again, trying to avoid collection of cash by transfer station attendants. And another recommendation is to set fees similar or higher than the surrounding towns, again, to sort of eliminate that incentive for people to smuggle in trash. So if you're a community surrounded by, towns that are charging $3 a bag, you don't want to set your fee at $1.50 a bag, or you're going to end up with potential problems. And like we've mentioned before, pay-as-you-throw transfer stations and transfer stations even without pay-as-you-throw all charge fees for bulky items. So that's another way to be covering the cost of waste management with, user fees. So primary messaging for sort of quote-unquote selling pay-as-you-throw, that it's fair and equitable for residents. So you're paying only for what you use. Those that are producing less trash and do good recycling are not subsidizing those that produce more. And everybody has the opportunity to take charge of their own costs and to lower their costs by purchasing smart, by recycling and reusing, and by composting, their kitchen scraps. So that's some key messaging. Some addressing some of the issues that come up. People are concerned that pay-as-you-throw is unfair to low-income residents. And again, some messaging, everybody has opportunities to reduce waste and the associated costs. A lot of low-income residents tend to be senior citizens. They tend to not generate very much trash anyway, so the amount of fees that they're paying are quite small. However, it might be a new cost for renters. So many communities, when they are setting up their systems, they do sort of try to incorporate or think about a subsidy for low-income residents, either reducing the price of a bag, one per week, or one free bag per week. But you don't want to give really anybody sort of an unlimited exemption. You don't want to give anybody an unlimited amount of free trash bags, that they can use, because then you're going to they're going to have neighbors and friends that are going to start giving them the trash to put, in the system. So consider a subsidy, but don't have it be unlimited. We talked about this earlier, illegal dumping. A lot of people think that's going to be a problem. None of the communities that I talked to, reported any increased problems. There's lots of studies that show the same thing. Like I mentioned before, if there were problems, it's usually with bulky materials, and they were problems before pay-as-you-throw. However, as Bob mentioned, sometimes there can be an issue, and you want to get law enforcement on your side up front to sort of nip it in the bud. If word gets around that you're going to get enforced on, then sort of problem people sort of don't try it anymore. So so it is important to sort of engage law enforcement and get them committed to helping, and usually I think every town I talked to said that was very willing to do that, and that it just, anything that might have come up was short-lived. And then the biggest one that definitely comes up here in the Northeast and is why the community that I live in does not have pay-as-you-throw is because of this misperception that it's a new tax. So part of educating about that is that, talking about the current cost of waste management in the tax rate, and then, what you could do, most likely will never happen though, is, lowering the tax rate by the amount so that it's an even swap. But what's more likely to happen is that your taxes are going to be going up to pay for something else, something in the school system or some other town project, a park, repaving the road. You need more money. You want to buy a new fire truck. Your taxes are going to go up. So instead of going up by, 100 units, they could go up by 50 units instead, because you're going to start doing pay-as-you-throw. So, it's got to be clearly talked about. And the other real benefit of pay-as-you-throw is over time you're really sort of moving your waste management costs to be more self-sustaining, so that it's not an increasing amount in the town budget. So it's a way to kind of keep taxes from increasing as much as they would otherwise. That's more difficult to sell in some places than others, but that's, it's changing the way people pay. It's an equitable system. It's eliminating subsidies of people, so sort of those messaging. Some other views that were expressed at a couple of the community meetings that we had up in Vermont was some of the communities that have a lot of second homes, they like trash service in their tax base, because then those rich out-of-staters are paying for, are subsidizing the trash of the year-round residents. So that was a view. And then also, the fear that composting is going to attract bears and other wild animals. So those were a couple of other things that came up sort of in the rural context. So I think I'll move into the next steps for communities, and then we can take questions then.
Sure.
So so recommendations from just every community that I talk to is sort of the first step is to establish some sort of a committee to focus on this issue. People that are concerned about waste management and recycling costs and issues, get together a group of folks that are from the town, government, the people that are dealing with trash and recycling, and some citizens. And the first real step there is to really understand the current costs. What is the labor, the hauling, disposal, recycling, capital expenses of what's going on, and then make that really clear to people in the tax bills and in any town budget, reports that are done. So the first step is to sort of get clear on what's really going on with waste management. Initiate sort of an ongoing public education and input process, to think about how much the town wants the fees to cover. Do they want it to cover all the trash and recycling costs, most of the costs, just the handling and the hauling and disposal costs? Thinking about what type of system you want, bags, containers, one size, multiple sizes. Determining the fee structure. I have another slide about this, which is a little more straightforward if you just wanted to cover the hauling and disposal costs, but if you wanted to include some of the labor and some of the other costs with waste management, the math gets more complicated, and you've also got to start thinking about, we're not going to have the amount of trash we have now to spread all the costs over. We're going to have a smaller amount of trash after Pay-As-You-Throw goes into place that we have to put these costs on. So I don't know if that's making sense or not. And then you look at what your Pay-As-You-Throw rates would be, and then you think about, well, is that too much for my residents to feasibly pay? Do we need to keep some of the costs in the tax rolls and only charge a lower rate? You've also got to plan for logistics. Where are these bags or stickers going to be sold? How are the fees going to be collected and managed? Definitely lots of public education. You've got to attain approval of the plan. In the Northeast, for the most part, we still have town meeting form of government, so a lot of these plans go before town meeting to get approved, and then you've got to publicize the system to residents, in advance of implementing it, so they know what to expect. So here's a quick slide on determining the fee, and I picked these numbers just to make the math very simple. So if this is just to cover the cost of hauling and disposal, the per ton cost, $100 per ton tipping fee. I know that seems crazy to some people in other parts of the country, but and it's a little high for the Northeast right now, but it's not completely unreasonable. Hauling of $20 a ton, and then you can sort of estimate that a ton is about 80 bags, that a 32-gallon bag of trash will weigh about 25 pounds. People did report to me that, there's usually a couple people that are kind of angry about the system and are determined to shove everything they can into the bag, and they're going to have a 50-pound bag. But for every person that's doing that, there's at least 10 people that have, their 32-gallon bag only weighs 15 pounds. So the 25 pounds per bag is, sort of a planning estimate. So if you had 80 bags per ton, and it's going to cost you $120 per ton, that's $150. $1.50 per 32-gallon bag to pay for hauling and disposal. And that is assuming everybody's paying the fee for every bag. So I think with that, we can take some questions quickly. We want to leave a little time to talk about a couple other things, but to show you the resources. And
sure. Yeah, there are a lot of questions, Jennifer. I'll just say that there's no way we will get through all of them, but we appreciate all of them, and any that are not answered during the webinar, we will follow up with you following the webinar to get back to you on these things. To start with, Jennifer, if you could back way up in your slides to the first case study slide. We did have a follow-on for that question about costs, and it was just very specific to that first slide where you have you list the year and the communities that have Pay-As-You-Throw, and then in parens you have costs. You have dollar amounts shown to represent a fee, and there's that permit there. So
yes, so those fees are what they are charging now for a 32-gallon bag. It's not the fee that's covering all their costs. Certainly, Reedsboro is not covering the whole cost of their system, but that's just what they're charging for the bag.
Very good.
Same with, you know. So we went through Northfield. They're just covering the hauling and disposal with their fee, and Canaan Vermont is like a 50-50 split with their fee. But these folks that are charging $3 are pretty much covering, you know, their costs, all the costs.
Great.
So.
A question about, has there been any determination or evaluation to determine if backyard composting or other organics diversion is taking place, and if that accounts for some of the reduction of waste and recycling tonnages? So has anybody studied that, Jennifer?
Studied that.
That either, you know, tried to measure increases in backyard composting or other
I have not done that. However, Bob Spencer, if you unmute him, in Vernon, Vermont, they collect organic. They have a collection at a drop-off, organics drop-off location that I believe has documented an increase in organics dropped off after pay-as-you-throw.
That's correct. That's correct. We doubled the amount of food scraps and soiled paper, cardboard that we allow with the food scraps in the first month that we started pay-as-you-throw last July, and it's held steady. I can tell you that here in Brattleboro, where they're starting pay-as-you-throw Monday, and we have optional curbside organics collection for 2 years now, we are anticipating a literally 100% increase in the number of households opting for that curbside collection. We sell the containers. We're sold out of them right now. So anecdotally, absolutely, significant increases in organics diversion. And we can't track the backyard composting, but we know a lot more of that is happening too.
Great.
I think it's a good area that could use some more analysis. Moss, do you have anything to add on that?
Moss Kaler here. Last summer I went around and weighed the curbside compost containers that our participants put at the curb, and found that probably you could count on about 9 to 12 pounds per week per household from people who were composting to their greatest extent. So I expect that Brattleboro is going to find, when we start our pay-as-you-throw program next week, we'll be weighing our trash bags and compost both at the curb, and I'm guessing that our 32-gallon pay-as-you-throw trash bags will weigh considerably less than the 25 pounds that you used as a rule of thumb. When you recycle to your greatest ability and you curbside compost, about the only thing left is filmy plastic, and you'd be hard-pressed to jam 25 pounds of plastic into a 32-gallon trash bag.
Right.
Thanks, Moss.
And we weighed in Greenfield, Massachusetts, where they have pay-as-you-throw, and they don't have a curbside compost program. The weight, average weight of their trash bags was surprisingly low. Their 32-gallon trash bags weighed about 14 or 15 pounds on average, and their 15-gallon pay-as-you-throw trash bags weighed about 8 pounds on average.
Right.
Great.
Yeah, so 25 pounds, you might plan around 20 pounds.
Yes.
You know, instead of 25, but, right.
Yes.
Another question, and you've talked a lot about the costs associated with the pay-as-you-throw programs, but do the case studies, the written case studies, which I know you're going to point people to, do they provide info on what the previous costs were for trash? And then, another piece of the question is how the pay-as-you-throw rules were implemented. I know we mentioned state regulation, but whether, what other types there are, be it city ordinance or contract with private haulers, what different forms that's taken on, what the driving force has been behind the shift.
Right. Okay, well, so the next slide I'll move to is talking about Vermont and the situation there. So, all those people that put Pay-As-You-Throw into place in the past were doing it through, like a town meeting vote and an ordinance sort of change in their community to, give authority for the program. Now, Vermont has a statewide law now that Paul and Bob alluded to, that's going to require pay-as-you-throw for all residential trash starting next week, July 1. It's applying to municipal and private service, so even those private haulers that are picking up trash from people, in all parts of the state, they also have to have a pay-as-you-throw, a volume fee-based system, and everybody, including the private haulers, have to provide recycling pickup or recycling services at your transfer station with no visible fee for recycling. So recycling, like we said, costs money. You can put the cost of recycling into what you charge for your trash, but there can't be a separate sort of visible fee to the consumer, to the resident, for recycling. And that the fees charged have to cover at least the hauling and disposal of that quantity of trash that's picked up. They do allow municipalities a little wiggle room in that, and I just put on the slide because Bob and Paul can talk to this too, but it's going to be interesting to see how it's enforced, how it's enforced against the private haulers, who's going to be doing that, how much of that's going to be happening. Vermont, a year from now, it's going to be really, I think, interesting to try to, get some folks from Vermont to present and talk about how this whole law is going. But so now, because they have the law in Vermont and towns have to do it, it doesn't sort of have to get passed through the town meeting system. It just, the selectmen can adopt it because they've got to do it by law. But Bob and Paul can talk about that too. People might have questions.
This is Paul. I'd just like to make a couple of comments if I could.
Yeah.
First off, we talked about putting materials in a bag. I think a key thing to remember, if you do purchase bags, if you buy a 1.5 mil bag, that limits the amount of trash you can put in the bag anyway, and that's something that just is kind of self-regulating. People try and put more than, say, 30, 35 pounds in the bag, it'll rip. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Another point I'd like to make too, earlier in a slide you showed Newark's cost per bag versus Canaan's cost per bag, and some people may be wondering, why do costs vary so much? If the town is under control of the system, instead of subbing it out to a private contractor, you can usually see a 50 to 75 cent decrease in per bag cost because there's no profit involved there. So that's something to keep in mind. It's nice to turn it over to a private company and not have to deal with it at all on your taxes. But if you'd like to, have a little more control over your costs and provide a slightly cheaper per bag fee, the town controlling that service, by hiring a town employee and doing all that, can save some money.
Yeah, this is Bob. I'd like to make a point or two also. On the education and outreach, some of the suppliers of the pay-as-you-throw bags offer education and outreach as part of their contract. They also will provide a service of distributing the bags to the retail marketplace and keeping the inventory stocked. There's a cost, added cost in the per bag fee or price, but that's still another option if you don't want to take that on as a municipal government. The education and bag distribution, some of the companies will do that. There are a handful of very well-established pay-as-you-throw bag companies out there, and Moss and I, when we set up Brattleboro's program, and Vernon, Vermont, interviewed quite a few firms and negotiated a pretty attractive deal. You know, when you're buying hundreds of thousands of bags, you have some clout. Also, just one of the downsides to be aware of pay-as-you-throw, it can be an enemy unto itself. When you reduce the amount of trash you generate, people are buying less bags. So when you first do the estimates, which your spreadsheet showed, Jennifer, how you calculate per bag, the assumption of how much weight per bag and the number of bags you're going to sell, you could end up with less revenue than you anticipated. And therefore, you could be in a position of having to raise the price per bag in future years, which in a way is self-defeating because you're now penalizing people for recycling. But that does happen.
Right. Yeah, especially if you're going to try to cover more than hauling and disposal costs, you've got to be planning on already the smaller amount of trash when you're figuring out your fees. You can't plan it on the current amount of trash. You have to think about the 50% reduction in trash.
But it truly is an estimate, and you know, it's very difficult. In Vernon, we found we're about 20,000 hours short this year. We're just now crunching the full first year that we fell short about 20,000 of our total costs from bag sales.
Yeah,
but the total cost is quite a bit, though, right? What's the total cost?
Oh, over 100,000, yeah.
Yeah, this is Moss Kaler. It's not simply a matter of whether you're trying to collect revenue to pay for costs beyond the hauling, collection, and the disposal. In Brattleboro, we're paying Triple T Trucking about $550,000 a year. They're contracted that amount with the town to pick up trash, recycling, and curbside compost. So when our trash tonnage drops dramatically, the contracted price with Triple T is going to remain the same. Maybe it'll go down somewhat, but it's going to roughly remain the same. And so when the amount of trash drops, and therefore the amount of pay-as-you-throw bags purchased drops, the tipping fee drops, and that's good, your disposal costs, but the hauling costs remain high. And as Bob said, if you are charging the true cost for a pay-as-you-throw bag to cover all your hauling and tipping fee costs, the cost of a bag may become so high as to cause, then you might really run into illegal dumping problems or very unhappy citizenry.
Right. So every community. All right, well, I want to just move on quickly to show you where the materials that we've developed are, because I think they're well done and might be useful for folks. And then we'll come back when we have time, hopefully, to have some more questions. So, like I said, we've got case studies, we've got fact sheets, we've got brochures, and what we're calling a smart toolkit on the NEWMOA website. So here's the page on the NEWMOA website. NEWMOA's website is a little antiquated, but can people see it? Is it big enough? Or Andy, what's the way to make it bigger?
Jennifer, if you click in the top right-hand menu, the little 4 stacked bars, you can just increase the size. The 4 horizontal bars, yeah.
Is that better?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so we've got case studies, outreach materials, workshop presentations. This one will go up here, and the smart toolkit. So I can, case studies, there's 11. I've tried to put whether they're a transfer station, if they require special bags or not. So there's several transfer stations that don't require special bags. Here's a curbside system with stickers. So the case studies, have more detail. I put as much detail as I could get. So I can't guarantee that they've all got, you know, all the costs and all the, you know, everybody's got everything, but I put as much as I could get. The outreach materials, this is the key. So we've got the Fair Pricing Strategies brochure. I'll open it in the 11 by 17 layout. It's just double-sided 11 by 17 brochure. I just want to show folks that it's very professional looking. It's, you know, this is the front page and the back page. We've got some case studies highlighted here, quotes from community folks about the system. So I think gives the benefits of pay-as-you-throw and also some, you know, brief outline of how it works and advice from experienced communities, resources for additional information. These brochures are meant to go to maybe town officials, to get people that are concerned about money and the community interested in pay-as-you-throw, and provide them with examples of where it's worked. So that's the purpose of this brochure. It is, like I said, one 11 by 17 page that's then, you know, folded into a brochure. You could also look at it as individual pages and print it out that way as well. We've got this outreach fact sheet that was produced. It's one double-sided 8.5 by 11 page, and it was done to be more of a handout for the general public to get them interested in pay-as-you-throw. It doesn't have case studies. It's just sort of why it's a good idea and sort of the next steps and trying to bust some of these messages. And one key thing about this one is that it is writable, so you can write in this box here. For more information, you could put in your, you know, your state, your town, your recycling committee, whoever's sort of trying to promote pay-as-you-throw. They can write their own contact information in this box before these got printed. They're in color, but obviously you could also print them out in black and white. So we have that fact sheet and the brochure. Definitely want to show you that. And the last thing is, well, the presentations are all up here, the different ones that I've given. This one will also go in if you want to look at and take any things from those. I'll also open up the Smart Toolkit. It's really more of a compilation of, you know, materials that we could find, as well as it's just going to point you back to the NEWMOA information that I already showed. But in outreach materials, so, you know, we've got these case studies written up and the brochures that we did, the handout that I just opened, but then also this town in New Hampshire, Canterbury, adopted pay-as-you-throw back in 2006, I guess, 5 or 6, and so just some of the handouts that and information that they generated. I also put a couple of presentations in here that aren't NEWMOA, that we, you know, found that we thought might be helpful to people. One that Connecticut did, and one that this Waste Zero company has done that also were good. We also produced this. This is the last thing I'll show you. This is a template program guide. It's in Word, so it's taking a little, and it is made for towns to just edit. That's why it's in Word, so people can edit it to fit. It's just already sort of a template for people to use to give as a handout for how their pay-as-you-throw program works or is going to work, and it just provides, you know, sort of a template for what you might want to include in it, and it's definitely made to edit so that it works for your community. It's definitely pre-set up for sort of a transfer station town and one that charges fees and collects bulky waste. So but, you know, people can edit it however they want. So I think with that, that's sort of where this information is. There's some more things, some links to some EPA documents and things in this SMART toolkit, you know, sort of this implementing SMART and other helpful resources. So this is all on the NEWMOA website. And how do I get back to the presentation, Andy, now?
Just use your bottom toolbar, Jennifer, your bottom menu bar.
Down here?
Yep.
Okay. So, and then lastly, we want to make you aware of, and I will, Andy, well, should I show this?
No.
We have a zero waste we developed, or Andy, you want to talk about it?
Sure, yeah, I'll jump in. So, you know, there's been, Jennifer shared a lot today, and Bob and Spencer and the others, I'm sorry, Bob and Paul, and there's been a lot of great questions and comments and discussion, and, you know, when we have forums like this, we always find that the conversation gets cut short. And so one of the things we've done is tried to take that conversation and move it online. We've set up, we have a professional social network known as the Zero Waste Connection. It's available, zerowasteconnection.org. And it's really meant to provide forums to continue discussions like this. We have groups on the site to have conversations like what we're talking about regarding pay-as-you-throw. Just pulling the site up on my screen. And, you know, feel free to log on to the site. It's easy to join. You just fill out a quick form. There'll be a little delay while we approve your request to join, but it's meant for program managers like yourselves to, at the local level as well as state and federal, to share information on how you're administering your programs. And really to help advance the notion of zero waste, or as we realistically like to say, or darn close to it. You know, just strategies around diversion, recycling, source reduction, and certainly SMART and pay-as-you-throw. I'm just pulling up the group within the site for specifically talking about SMART and pay-as-you-throw. But
Andy, I'm not seeing, or am I just because I see it? Okay, never mind.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like it's broadcasting okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you can join the site and talk with your peers about, you know, how you're managing your program, what's working and what's not. There are a lot of questions that we left on the table about cost structure, you know, what's a good target for MSW per household per year, you know, as these costs continue to come down through pay-as-you-throw and other strategies. There's a bulky waste group on the site, so there's lots of interesting conversations that we can have through the site. We generally post information on lots of events related to zero waste topics, and send out periodic email updates on things that are happening on the site. So we hope that you'll take the time to log on and join the conversation.
Okay. So that was pretty much the end. I have one slide on with my contact information. I don't know if I should show that. Okay.
Sure.
Let's see. Okay. There. So I think we are at 2:30. We're supposed to be ending now. Folks want to stay on a little longer if they can, and we can talk some more questions, or we can end. So I'm available to stay if people want to, but looks like people are signing off. So we will do our best to get back to people that ask questions if we feel like they didn't get kind of covered later in the talk. If anybody is typing in that they want to stay, you know, we can. Okay. I think we'll just end it, Andy.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and thanks to Jennifer, Bob, Paul, and others for the discussions. Lots of great information. I hope that it helps you in your programs.
Yes, and please go to the website and download and use the materials that we've developed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Paul.